My son smiled like a good man that night. That was the dangerous part. He leaned close and said, "Dad, it's just to protect your future." Across the table, the consultant slid the contract toward me, smooth as butter on warm bread. Then he pushed my checkbook a little closer. I had the pen in my hand. One signature. One check. That was all they needed. Then the waitress bent down to refill my water and whispered so softly I almost missed it. "Sir, don't sign that check." My son's smile froze. The consultant kept smiling. I looked at the waitress. Her hand trembled beside the glass. She whispered again, "Turn the contract over." So I did. And on the back page, under the small print they hoped I would never read, I saw the first words that turned a family dinner into a trap. Welcome back to Final Act Revenge. If you are watching late tonight, please take care of your health, drink some water, and stay with me. My son thought I was too old to read the back page. He forgot I had spent 30 years finding the line people hoped no one would notice. My name is Edwin Robertson. I was 68 years old when a waitress in the Villages stopped me from signing a check my own son needed to clear. I spent 31 years as a municipal building inspector. That means I made a living looking at things people hoped I would overlook. A hairline crack near a foundation, a window sealed wrong before hurricane season, a permit number copied from last year's job, a stair rail that looked sturdy until you leaned your weight on it. Most people thought my work was about buildings. It was not. It was about trust. When a family buys a house, they do not see the wiring behind the wall. They do not see the soft wood under fresh paint. They see flowers by the porch, clean countertops, a real estate smile, and a promise that everything is fine. My job was to ask, "Fine according to whom?" That habit followed me into retirement. I read labels before I bought medicine. I checked receipts before leaving a counter. I never signed a form until I understood who benefited if I did. At least, that is who I thought I was. Then my son sat beside me at dinner and called a contract protection. Funny how a familiar voice can make an old rule feel rude. I live near the Villages, Florida, where the golf carts have turn signals. The lawns behave better than some relatives, and everybody knows a man who can fix your sprinkler by Tuesday. It is a bright place, busy. Music in the town square, couples dancing before sunset, retirees comparing doctors like baseball cards, and more dinner invitations than a widower sometimes knows what to do with. I was not rich, but I was comfortable enough to be noticed. A paid-down home, a modest retirement account, a clean truck, no gambling, no big medical debt. To a decent person, that is a quiet life. To the wrong person, it is an opportunity. My son's name is Nolan Robertson. When he was a boy, he followed me through half-built houses and asked why I carried a flashlight in daylight. I told him, because the dangerous parts hide where the sun doesn't reach. He liked that answer then. Later, he became the kind of man who hated being inspected. Nolan was smart, charming when he needed to be, the sort of son who could call on a Tuesday and make you feel guilty before he mentioned what he wanted. He had tried a few businesses. Some almost worked. Some failed faster than he admitted. And when the last one cracked beneath him, he came to me for money. Not a little money, enough to put my house at risk if things went wrong. I asked for numbers. He wanted faith. I asked for a repayment plan. He heard rejection. He said, "You inspected everybody else's house, Dad, but you never looked close enough at what was collapsing in mine." That sentence stayed with me because it was not entirely false. I had been a careful provider. Careful men are not always tender ones. Sometimes I answered fear with paperwork. Sometimes I taught responsibility when my son needed comfort first. I can admit that now. But a father's mistakes do not become a son's permission slip. In the weeks before that dinner, Nolan started using new phrases. Legacy protection, family alignment, modern planning. You need someone who understands these things now. Each phrase sounded respectful. Each one moved me closer to a chair I had not chosen. By the time Nolan invited me to that dinner, He had already learned which words made a father lower his guard. Nolan picked me up just after sunset. He did not call it a seminar. That would have made me suspicious. He called it dinner. "Just dinner, Dad," he said, pulling up in a clean white SUV that still smelled new enough to make me wonder who was paying for it. "No pressure. You'll like the place." That was the first phrase I should have questioned. No pressure. People rarely say that unless they know pressure is waiting inside. We drove through the villages with the windows half down. Music floated from one of the town squares. Golf carts blinked along the streets like polite little beetles. Couples in bright shirts walked toward restaurants, laughing like retirement had finally given them permission to breathe. It was the kind of evening that made a man lower his guard. Maybe Nolan counted on that. The restaurant sat near the square, warm lights in the windows, palm trees moving gently outside. The kind of place where waiters remembered regulars and every table seemed to have someone talking about grandchildren, golf, or knee surgery. Nolan smiled as he opened the door for me. That smile again. Too careful. Too polished. A son's smile should not look rehearsed. Inside, a hostess led us past the main dining room to a private room in the back. That was when my old inspector's mind stirred. "Private room?" I asked. Nolan gave a small laugh. "They reserved space for a few families. It's more comfortable." Families. Not clients. Not prospects. Families. I noticed words before I noticed people. Always had. The room held maybe 14 seniors, seated at round tables with white cloths and folded napkins. There were leather folders at every place setting, good pens, name cards. Printed menus offering steak, salmon, or chicken piccata. Free dinner does not make a contract honest, but it does make people sit longer. A man in a navy suit stood near a small screen. He had silver hair, perfect teeth, and the soft confidence of someone who knew exactly when to pause. Gavin Sloan, that was the name on the brochure. Silver Key Legacy Group. He shook my hand with both of his. "Mr. Robertson, Nolan has told me wonderful things about you." I looked at my son. "Has he?" Nolan placed a hand on my shoulder. "Only the truth, Dad." Gavin smiled. "We're here tonight to talk about clarity, not fear, not pressure, just clarity for the people you love." That sounded good. Most traps do, at first. A waitress moved quietly between the tables, filling water glasses. Her name tag read Maggie. She had the quick hands of someone who had carried heavy trays for years, and the watchful eyes of someone who had learned that customers reveal themselves when they think staff disappear. When she set my water down, her gaze caught the silver key folder. Just for a second, her hand paused. Then she moved on. I noticed. I did not understand. Dinner began. Gavin spoke while we ate. He talked about probate. He talked about families fighting after funerals. He talked about seniors leaving documents scattered in drawers. He never raised his voice. He never sounded greedy. That was the skill of it. He made the room feel responsible for listening. "Good planning," he said, "is not about money. It is about peace." Several people nodded. Nolan nodded too quickly. I watched him from the corner of my eye. He had heard this before, maybe more than once. Gavin passed around a short form. "Tonight, for those who want to reserve a private review, there is a simple planning retainer. No obligation beyond the initial consultation. It simply locks your appointment window." I looked down. Silver Key Legacy Protection Review. Retainer. $2,500. Nolan leaned close. "Dad, this is exactly what I've been talking about. Organization, protection, keeping things from getting messy later." "Messy for whom?" I asked. He smiled, but his jaw tightened. "For everybody." Maggie returned with coffee. This time, when she reached my table, she placed a napkin beside my water glass. Not in the usual place, closer to my hand. There was writing on it. 2 words, back page. I looked up at her. She did not look back. Gavin slid a contract toward me. "Take your time," he said, while placing the pen directly on the signature line. Nolan tapped the folder gently. Dad, don't overthink it. You taught me planning matters. That was a clever thing to say. He used my own values like a hand on my back, guiding me toward a door I had not opened. I reached for my checkbook. Maggie came by again, pouring water no one needed. Then she leaned close enough that only I could hear. "Sir," she whispered, "don't sign that check." My fingers stopped. Across from me, Gavin kept smiling. Beside me, Nolan's smile held too still. I looked at the napkin, then at my son's face. And for the first time that night, I wondered which one of them was trying harder to protect me. I did not move right away. That is something age can give you if you let it. When you are young, fear makes you jump. When you are older, fear sometimes makes you still. I kept my hand on the checkbook and looked at the waitress. Maggie had already stepped back, carrying the water pitcher like nothing had happened. But her eyes told a different story. They said, "Please." They said, "I have seen this before." Nolan leaned closer. "Dad?" His voice was soft, too soft. "Everything okay?" I looked down at the contract. Gavin Sloan kept that professional smile in place, the kind of smile men use when they do not want a room to notice they are watching your hands. "Mr. Robertson," he said, "there is no rush. We keep the process simple." Simple. That word has fooled more people than complicated ever could. I tapped the folder. If it is simple, it should survive being turned over. Nolan's hand moved. Not much. Just enough to rest on the top edge of the contract, like he was steadying the papers for me, or stopping them. I looked at his fingers, then at his face. "Move your hand, son." He froze, only for a second. Then he smiled. "Dad, you're making this weird." "No," I said. "The paper did that." A few people at the next table glanced over. Gavin noticed. He lowered his voice, still smooth. "The back pages are standard disclosures, nothing unusual." I had heard that line before in a dozen forms. Standard, routine, boilerplate. That was where people hid the sharp hooks. I turned the contract over. The font changed first. That was what I noticed. The front page had wide margins, clean headings, comforting phrases. Legacy Protection Review, Family Peace Planning, Document Organization. The back page looked like a different animal. Small print, tighter spacing. Legal phrases packed so close together they seemed to be leaning on each other. I read the first heading, Non-Refundable Planning Retainer, then another, Referral Compensation Event. My thumb stopped. There are words you do not expect to find at a dinner table with your son. Compensation was one of them. Nolan gave a little laugh. "Dad, those are just disclosures." I kept reading. Referral partner, Nolan Robertson. For a moment, the room changed shape. The sound of forks and glasses became distant. The soft music outside the private room faded behind the blood moving in my ears. My son's name was there. Not on a family note, not as an emergency contact, not as the person driving me home. On the back of the contract. I looked at him. "You were listed as a referral partner?" He swallowed. "That just means I introduced you." Gavin stepped in immediately. "Family referrals are common, Mr. Robertson. They help us understand trust dynamics." "Trust dynamics," I repeated. I looked at the page again. Under Nolan's name was the next line. Referral Compensation Event. Initial planning retainer processed. Processed, not explained, not completed after services. Processed. I turned the paper slightly toward Nolan. "So, when my check clears, you get paid?" His face tightened. "That's not how I would say it." "How would you say it?" He did not answer. Gavin did. Referral compensation, when applicable, is part of our disclosed outreach model. It does not affect the quality of service. I looked at him. I inspected buildings for 31 years. When a contractor told me a hidden beam did not affect the quality of the work, I still opened the wall. His smile thinned. I kept reading. Family contact authorization, Nolan Robertson. Client data access consent. Affiliate services, May contact client, binding arbitration. Cancellation window, 72 hours. It was all there. Not on the page they had shown me while the salmon was warm. Not under the headline about peace. On the back page. The page Maggie told me to read. My checkbook sat open beside the water glass. The check was blank. But Gavin's intake sheet near his tablet already had my name on it. My address, the retainer amount, even a space for the check number. I pointed to it. You wrote the check number section before I wrote the check. Gavin glanced down. That is just preparation. Nolan leaned toward me, his voice sharper now. Dad, don't turn this into something ugly. I looked at him for a long second. You put your name on the page that gets paid when I stop reading, and you're worried I'm making it ugly? He looked away. That was the first honest thing he did all night. Maggie passed behind me again. She did not speak this time. She did not have to. The check was still unsigned. But my son's name was already waiting on the page that got paid when it cleared. Nolan did not raise his voice. That made it worse. A man who shouts is trying to win a room. A man who lowers his voice is trying to control one. Dad, he said, leaning close enough that only I could hear him, you're embarrassing yourself. I looked at the back page again. My son's name sat there in small print, neat and patient, like it had arrived before I did. Referral partner, Nolan Robertson. Referral compensation event, initial planning retainer processed. Family contact. Authorization, Nolan Robertson. A father can read 100 ugly sentences in his life and still be unprepared for the one with his child's name in it. Gavin Sloan folded his hands. Mr. Robertson, perhaps we should step aside and clarify the language privately. Why privately? I asked. His smile held. Because financial planning is personal. So is betrayal. That got a few eyes from the next table. Nolan's jaw tightened. Dad? I closed the folder halfway, not enough to hide the page, just enough to make him wonder what I would do next. The room had changed. People were still eating, but slower now. Forks paused above plates. A woman in a blue cardigan looked down at her own folder. An older man beside her adjusted his glasses. Good. Sometimes one person turning a page gives other people permission to wonder what theirs says. Maggie walked by with a coffee pot. She did not stop. Nolan saw me look at her. His face hardened in that quick, ugly way people reveal when they think someone beneath them has interfered. She's just a waitress, Dad, he said. She doesn't understand these documents. The words landed cold. Not because they were aimed at me, because they were not. I turned slowly. That waitress read what my own son hoped I wouldn't. Maggie froze for half a second near the service station. Gavin cleared his throat. Let's be respectful. Our staff here has been wonderful. Our staff. Not her name. Not Maggie. A category. I had spent too many years watching people hide disrespect under manners. I said, her name is Maggie. Nolan exhaled sharply. You don't even know her. No, I said. But she warned me before you did. That one hurt him. I saw it. For 1 second, the polished sun disappeared, and the boy who hated being corrected stood in front of me. You always do this, he said. Do what? Make me the problem. I tapped the contract. I didn't type your name there. His face reddened. You don't understand what I'm trying to do for you. Then explain it without Gavin helping you. Gavin's smile finally thinned. Nolan looked at him, then back at me. It's a referral, that's all. They give families credit for connecting people to services. Credit? Yes. Money? He hesitated. That depends on the account. I almost laughed, but there was no humor in me. You brought me to dinner so my check could help your account? No. I brought you because you need planning. I have planning. You have old documents in a drawer. I have documents I understand. He leaned forward. And that's the problem. You think because you inspected buildings 30 years ago, you understand everything now. There it was. The age blade, wrapped in concern. I had heard older men talk about that feeling, but feeling it from my own son was different. It was not someone saying I was wrong. It was someone suggesting time itself had made me unreliable. Maggie approached again, slowly this time, as if bringing water to a table where something fragile had cracked. Nolan saw her coming and snapped, "We're fine." She stopped. I looked at her. "Miss Fletcher, would you mind leaving the pot here?" Her eyes flicked to Gavin, then to me. "Of course, sir." She set it down. As she did, a small receipt slipped beside my napkin. Restaurant receipt paper, folded once. She moved away before anyone noticed. Almost anyone. Gavin noticed. His eyes followed her. Nolan noticed too, but he was still too angry to understand what she had done. I kept my hand on the folded slip. Gavin said, "Mr. Robertson, I want to reassure you that all referral information is disclosed. Nothing is hidden." On the back page. That is still disclosure. I looked at him. Transparency on the back page is not transparency. It is storage. The older man at the next table murmured, "That's not wrong." His wife elbowed him, but not hard. Connie Dale, the restaurant manager, appeared near the doorway. She wore the face of someone who knew a private event was becoming public trouble. "Is everything all right here?" Gavin answered before I could. "Perfectly fine, Connie. Just a client question." Client. I had entered as a father. Somewhere between the salad and the signature line, I had become a client. Nolan whispered, "Dad, please, don't embarrass me." I looked at him for a long moment. "You put my name in a folder, your name on a commission page, and a checkbook in front of me. Then asked me not to embarrass you?" He looked down. That silence told me more than his explanations. I unfolded Maggie's slip under the edge of my napkin. There were 2 lines in careful handwriting. My mother signed one, "Ask about cancellation." My chest tightened. So Maggie had not guessed. She had remembered. I closed my checkbook. The sound was small, but Nolan heard it. Gavin heard it. Maggie heard it from across the room. I stood slowly. "I need my glasses from the car." Nolan looked relieved, like he thought I needed an excuse to calm down. "Okay," he said. "I'll come with you." "No." His eyes lifted. "I can get my own glasses." Gavin started to speak, but I was already holding the contract. "I'll bring this back." "Mr. Robertson," he said, "we generally keep originals in the room." I looked at him. "Then you can generally wait." I walked toward the hallway with my checkbook closed, the back page folded under my thumb, and Maggie's note burning in my palm. I told my son I needed my glasses. The truth was, for the first time that night, I could see him perfectly. Outside the restaurant, the villages looked like nothing bad could happen there. That is the trick of pretty places. The square was glowing. Music floated across the sidewalks. Golf carts rolled by with little flags on the back. Couples laughed under string lights, and somewhere nearby, a man was telling a story too loudly, because retirement had given him an audience. I stood near a row of palms with a contract in my hand and Maggie's note folded in my palm. My mother signed one. "Ask about cancellation." Those 5 words felt heavier than the folder. I took out my phone and called Iris McKenna. Iris was not family. That made her useful. She was a retired bank compliance officer, a woman who could read a fee disclosure the way some people read weather. We played cards on Wednesdays, and she had once told me, "If a contract wants you relaxed, sit up straighter." She answered on the second ring. "Edwin? I need your eyes." "That sounds expensive." "I'm standing outside a restaurant with a contract my son wants me to sign." The joking left her voice. "Read me the headings, not the big font. The ugly font." I turned the pages under the yellow light by the entrance. Non-refundable planning retainer. Bad start. Referral compensation event. Worse. Family contact authorization. "Who?" I swallowed. "Nolan." Silence. Then Iris said, "Your son is not just sitting beside you at dinner. He is inside the document." I looked through the window. Inside, Nolan was standing near Gavin Sloan, talking with his hands low and tight. Gavin still had that calm smile. Men like him could make a fire alarm sound like a scheduled bell. I kept reading. Client data access consent. What data? Trust summary, property documents, insurance policies, beneficiary information, retirement income overview. Iris exhaled. That check is not buying a meeting, Edwin. It is opening a door. My fingers tightened on the folder. I had inspected enough buildings to know the difference between a door and a trapdoor. What about cancellation? I found the line. 72 hours. Business days? No, it just says 72 hours from retainer processing. Of course it does. There was a bite in her voice now. Iris did not get angry quickly, but when she did, she became precise. Any arbitration clause? I read it. Yes. Affiliate services? Yes. Document review upgrades? Yes. Then the retainer is bait, small enough to sound reasonable, large enough to commit the customer emotionally. After that, they move you into paid reviews, insurance audits, maybe estate restructuring. I looked down at my unsigned check still tucked in the checkbook. $2,500. Not enough to look like a robbery, just enough to unlock the next room. Before I tell you what else was hidden in that contract, let me ask you something. If your own child brought you to dinner, smiled beside you, and told you a check was only to protect your future, but a waitress warned you not to sign, would you trust your child, or would you turn the page? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes the most dangerous line is not the one they ask you to sign. It is the one they hope you never read. I took pictures of the back page. Every heading, every small line, every place where my son's name appeared like a nail driven quietly into wood. Iris said, "Do not hand them the only copy. It's their contract. It became yours when they asked for your signature." That sounded like Iris. Hard, clear, and probably right. The door opened behind me. Nolan stepped out. He saw the phone in my hand. His expression changed from concern to calculation. "Who are you calling?" "A friend." "We're in the middle of something." "I know." He held out his hand. "Dad, give me the contract." "No." His mouth tightened. "You're making this bigger than it is." I looked at him. That is what people say when they need something kept small. He glanced toward the window, probably checking whether Gavin could see us. "This is humiliating. For you? For both of us." I almost felt sorry for him then, not enough to hand him the folder, but enough to remember that shame had always turned Nolan sharp. When he was 13, he lied about a bad grade for 2 weeks because he could not bear disappointing me. When he was 28, he hid a failed loan application until late fees turned into phone calls. Now he was standing under restaurant lights, trying to keep a back page from becoming a mirror. "I asked you one question inside," I said. He looked away. "Were you being paid if I signed?" "It's not like that." "Then make it like something." He rubbed his face. "It's a referral credit. Gavin said it was normal." "Gavin is not my son." "No, he's a professional. So was I." That landed. His shoulders dropped a little. Then he said the thing I think he had been saving. "You always made money sound cleaner than survival." I did not answer. He continued. "When I needed help, you wanted numbers. When I needed faith, you wanted collateral. Now I find a way to connect you with people who can help you organize everything, and suddenly, I'm a criminal? You put your name on my authorization page. I was trying to be involved. You put your name beside compensation." He looked toward the square, jaw moving. For 1 second, the boy was there again. Angry, ashamed, needing something he could not ask for without turning it into an accusation. Then the restaurant door opened again. Gavin Sloan stepped out, still smiling. "Mr. Robertson, perhaps we should return to the table. These documents can feel overwhelming without context." I looked at him. Good documents survive distance. His smile paused. Iris was still on the line. I could hear her breathing. Gavin looked at my phone. "Are you recording?" "No," I said, "but I am learning." Nolan whispered, "Dad, please." That word pulled at something old in me. Please. A son can weaponize many things without meaning to. A memory, a failure, a father's guilt. A word he once used when he was small enough to carry. I folded the contract against my chest. "I'm going back inside," I said. Gavin relaxed. Nolan did too. Then I finished. "But I'm not going back in as your signer." I walked toward the private dining room with my check still unsigned, Maggie's note in my pocket, and Iris waiting on the phone. For the first time, I understood Nolan had not brought me to dinner. He had brought me into paperwork. When I walked back into that private dining room, the food was getting cold. That detail stayed with me. Not the leather folders, not Gavin Sloane's smile. The food. 14 older people had been given warm plates and soft lighting, then quietly surrounded with documents most of them would never read before dessert. It was a clever kind of pressure. No one wants to look suspicious while eating salmon. No one wants to be the difficult old person at a nice dinner. No one wants to admit they need help understanding a contract while the man in the suit keeps calling everything simple. I sat down slowly. Nolan stayed standing beside me for a moment, like a son guarding a father, or a salesman guarding a signature. Gavin returned to the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we'll continue in just a moment. Some questions have come up, and that is perfectly normal." Perfectly normal. That phrase had become a wet towel over smoke. I looked toward the service station. Maggie stood there with a tray in her hands. Her eyes met mine, then dropped. She looked afraid. Not of me, of what she had started. Iris was still on my phone, the call muted but not ended. I set its screen down beside my water glass like an extra witness, then I stood again. Nolan whispered, "Dad, sit down." I did not. I looked at Maggie. "Miss Fletcher," I said, "may I ask you something?" The room turned toward her. That was not fair to her, maybe, but silence had already done enough damage that night. Gavin lifted a hand. "Mr. Robertson, restaurant staff should not be placed in the middle of private financial discussions." I turned to him. "You placed my son in the middle of mine." A few people shifted in their chairs. Maggie came forward slowly. Connie Dale, the restaurant manager, appeared near the doorway again. Her face was tight with worry. "Maggie," she said, "is there a problem?" Maggie looked at Connie, then at Gavin, then at me. For a second, I thought she might deny everything. I would not have blamed her. People with paychecks do not always get the luxury of courage. But she set the tray down. "My mother signed one," she said. The room went quiet. Nolan closed his eyes as if her sentence had ruined him personally. Gavin smiled gently. "I'm sorry. Signed one what?" Maggie looked at him. "A planning retainer. A legacy review. Different company name, same wording." His smile did not move. "There are many reputable planning firms." "My mother thought that too." Connie stepped closer. "Maggie, are you saying this happened to your family?" Maggie nodded. "She went to a dinner like this after my uncle brought her here. She thought she was paying for one appointment. Then the cancellation window passed before she understood what she had signed. They started calling about document review, insurance audit, estate restructuring. Every conversation had another fee." Gavin folded his hands. "I cannot speak to another company's practices." Maggie's voice trembled, but it held. "Then speak to why your back page uses the same clock." An older woman in a blue cardigan reached for her own folder. I remembered her from the next table. June Pritchard. She turned her contract over. Her husband had passed, if I remembered right. She lived 2 streets over from the recreation center and drove a red golf cart with a little plastic flamingo attached to the back. She adjusted her glasses. "Mine says 72 hours, too." Gavin said, "That is standard." June kept reading. "And there's a family contact line." Nolan muttered, "This is getting ridiculous." The older man beside June opened his folder too. Otto Crane, retired CPA, if local gossip had served me correctly. He read for less than 10 seconds before his mouth tightened. "Affiliate services," he said. "That usually means the first fee is the lobby." Gavin gave a small laugh. "Mr. Crane, I assure you, Otto raised one finger. Don't assure me. Explain the schedule. That changed the room. One old man asking for numbers can do what outrage cannot. It invites everyone else to put their glasses on. Folders opened, pages turned. The sound was soft, but it was the sound of a room waking up. Maggie stood near my chair now, hands clasped in front of her apron. My mother didn't lose everything, she said quietly, but she lost enough to stop trusting herself. That sentence hurt more than if she had named a dollar amount. Money can be counted. Shame spreads. She used to handle her own bills, Maggie continued. After that, she started asking me to read every envelope. She said if she had been smarter, she would have known better. Maggie looked at me. She was smart. She was just alone at the wrong table. I felt that in my chest, because I had been almost alone too. My son had been beside me, but not with me. There is a difference. Nolan spoke sharply. So, now this is about your mother? I turned to him. No. It is about what happens when people are made to feel foolish for asking questions. His eyes flashed. You're doing it again. What? Turning everyone into a witness against me. I lowered my voice. Nolan, you wrote yourself into my contract before I wrote my check. He looked around the room, aware now of every face. He hated that. Not because it was unfair, because it was public. Gavin stepped toward the table. Mr. Robertson, perhaps you and your son need to discuss personal matters separately. Our documents are designed to protect families, not divide them. I picked up the back page. Then why does the page that mentions family also mention compensation? He did not answer quickly enough. June did. Mine has a referral section too. Her voice was small, but the room heard it. My nephew is listed here. Otto leaned toward her document. Did you authorize that? June shook her head. I told him he could come with me. I didn't know he'd be in the paperwork. Maggie looked at me. I looked at Gavin. The dinner had changed completely now. The private room was no longer full of guests. It was full of readers. That is a dangerous thing for any contract built on people not reading. Connie Dale stepped farther inside. Mr. Sloan, she said carefully, I think we should pause the presentation. Gavin's smile tightened. Connie, that may create unnecessary confusion. Otto said, Too late. We found the necessary kind. A few people gave a nervous laugh. Not much. Enough. Nolan leaned close to me. Dad, please. This is spiraling. No, I said. It is unfolding. His face hardened. You wanted to hurt me tonight. I looked at him. I wanted to sign a check because my son told me it would protect my future. That silenced him. For a second, grief crossed his face. Real grief. Then pride covered it again. Maggie picked up an empty plate from our table, but before she walked away, she said one more thing. My mother said the worst part was not the money. It was realizing someone at that table knew more than she did and still let her sign. She looked at Nolan when she said it. He looked away first. That was when I knew the back page was not an accident. It was not poor design. It was not harmless disclosure. It was the part of the business model that depended on trust, embarrassment, and people being too polite to turn paper over at dinner. When June turned her contract over, I realized the back page was not an accident. It was the business model. Gavin Sloan called for a pause. That was the word he used. Not stop, not explain. Pause. Men like Gavin never surrender a room. They only rename the pressure. Mr. Robertson, he said, perhaps you and Nolan should speak privately for a moment. Family concerns deserve privacy. I looked at Maggie, then at June Pritchard, still holding her contract upside down like it had betrayed her in a language she was only beginning to understand. Privacy had protected too much already. But Nolan's face had changed. The anger was still there. So was shame. And under both of them, something I recognized. A son who had come to the edge of asking for help and chosen disguise instead. I followed him into the hallway. The restaurant noise softened behind us. Plates, laughter, music from the square. All of it became distant, like somebody had closed a door on another life. Nolan stood near a framed photograph of smiling golfers. He rubbed his forehead. "You always do this," he said. I waited. "You turn everything into an inspection." I asked why your name was on my contract. "You asked in front of everyone. You brought me there in front of everyone." His eyes flashed. "I brought you because you never listened to me alone." That landed, harder than I expected. He took a breath, then looked at the floor. "When my business started falling apart, I came to you." "I remember." "No, Dad. You remember the numbers. You remember the bad loan terms. You remember the supplier contract. You remember everything except how scared I was." I had no answer ready. That is how you know a sentence has found truth. "You asked for projections," he said. "I needed my father. I was trying to protect you. You were protecting your house." The words struck deeper than the commission line, because maybe part of them was true. I had been careful. Too careful sometimes. A careful man can mistake refusal for wisdom. He can look at a drowning person and explain why the water is unsafe instead of throwing a rope. Nolan looked at me then, not as the man in the private room, as my son. "I thought if this worked, you'd be protected, and I'd get breathing room, just a little, enough to stop feeling like every month is a wall." "So you put yourself on my paperwork?" "I didn't think of it like that." "You should have." His face twisted. "You always knew what I should have done after I already failed." That one hurt too. Gavin stepped into the hallway, holding my checkbook. My checkbook. I did not remember leaving it in his reach. "Mr. Robertson," he said, gently, "we can still handle this cleanly tonight. No one needs to leave upset. You can protect yourself and help your son move forward." Cleanly. There it was. A dirty thing in a clean shirt. He opened the checkbook and placed the pen across it. Nolan did not stop him. That silence told me plenty. And still, my hand moved. Not because I believed Gavin, not because I trusted the contract, because I looked at Nolan and saw every year I had answered his fear with a question about collateral. I thought of the boy who followed me through unfinished houses, the teenager who stopped telling me when things went wrong, the grown man who had learned to turn need into strategy because asking plainly felt too humiliating. Maybe I had helped build that. Maybe the back page was his betrayal, but maybe the distance between us had my fingerprints on it too. I picked up the pen. Nolan's shoulders lowered. Gavin's smile returned. For one terrible second, I almost signed to end the pain. Then Maggie came through the hallway carrying a tray of empty glasses. She should not have stopped, but she did. She set a folded napkin beside the checkbook and walked on without looking at me. One sentence was written on it. "Ask who entered your home value." I stared at the words. The pen felt heavier. I looked at Gavin. "How did you know my home value?" His smile did not vanish, but it lost its temperature. Nolan looked toward the dining room, not at me. That was the answer before anyone spoke. I set the pen down, slowly. Gavin said, "Mr. Robertson, many estimates are publicly available." "Then why did Maggie tell me to ask who entered it?" Nolan whispered, "Dad." I turned to him. "No, this is the part where you stop calling my questions embarrassing." For the first time that night, he looked afraid. I thought the check was the trap. Then Maggie's napkin made me ask the question that showed me my son had opened the door long before dinner. The hallway went very quiet after I asked that question, not silent. Restaurants are never silent. There was still music coming from the square outside, laughter from the bar, plates moving in the kitchen, silverware tapping against china. But around the three of us, the air tightened. Gavin Sloan looked at the napkin, then at me, then at Nolan. That little triangle told me enough to keep breathing slowly. "How did you know my home value?" I asked again. Gavin adjusted his cuff. A man only adjusts his cuff in the middle of a crisis when he needs 1 second to invent a cleaner sentence. "Mr. Robertson," he said, "many property estimates are publicly available." That is not what I asked. Nolan stepped in. Dad, don't interrogate him. I looked at my son. I am not interrogating him. I am inspecting the wall after smelling smoke. Gavin gave a polite little laugh. Your background makes you naturally cautious. I respect that. No, I said. You studied that too, didn't you? His smile paused. Nolan's face changed. Not much. Enough. I picked up my phone and unmuted Iris. Iris, are you still there? Every ugly word, she said. Gavin's eyes narrowed. You have someone on the line? I have someone who reads contracts without selling them. Iris said, ask for the intake sheet. Gavin shook his head. Our internal intake documents are proprietary. I repeated the word slowly. Internal. Then I turned to Nolan. So there was an intake before I gave intake? He looked away. That hurt more than the check, because a check can be torn up. But a son looking away has already chosen his hiding place. Connie Dale appeared at the end of the hallway, drawn by the tension the way good managers smell trouble before guests do. Is everything all right? No, I said, but it can still become useful. Gavin's voice sharpened under the polish. Connie, this is a private client matter. I am not your client, I said. Potential client, he corrected. That may be worse. Iris spoke through the phone. Edwin, ask whether the profile includes asset range, property status, and resistance notes. I looked at Gavin. Does your intake profile include my asset range? He said nothing. My property status? Nothing. Resistance notes? Nolan closed his eyes. There it was. I felt something inside me go cold, not angry, yet cold. A building inspector knows the moment when a crack stops being cosmetic. Gavin finally said, preparation helps us serve families responsibly. I turned to Connie. Would you ask Mr. Sloan to show the portion of the intake that relates to me? Gavin said, that is not appropriate. Connie looked at the private dining room. More seniors were standing now. June Pritchard had her folder in both hands. Otto Crane was talking to another couple, pointing at the back page. The dinner was no longer a dinner. It was a room full of people realizing the free meal had a hook in it. Connie faced Gavin. If your company is using my restaurant to collect signatures, I need to know whether guests were properly informed. Gavin pulled out his tablet. Fine, I can show general intake notes, nothing confidential. He tapped twice. Too quickly. Iris said, watch what he skips. He turned the tablet toward me for barely a second. I saw my name. Edwin Robertson. Age 68. Residence near the Villages. Retired municipal building inspector. Then his thumb moved. Go back, I said. It's just basic context. Go back. Connie stepped closer. Please. He went back. There it was. Estimated home value, $485,000 to $520,000. Mortgage status, low or likely paid down. Retirement income, stable. Trust documents, older, likely self-managed. Decision style, detail-focused, resistant to urgency, family support, son present for signing. And then the line that made the hallway tilt beneath my feet. Father resistant, but persuadable. I read it once, then again. A man can be called old, stubborn, difficult, cheap, suspicious. I had heard all of those in one form or another, but persuadable was different. Persuadable meant someone had studied where to push. I looked at Nolan. You gave them this? He swallowed. I gave them background. You gave them my life. Dad, you told them how to handle me. His mouth opened, but no words came. Gavin stepped in. Mr. Robertson, that language is internal shorthand. It is not meant as disrespect. I turned to him. When a contractor called rot moisture history, the floor still collapsed. Otto Crane's voice came from the doorway. I'd like to see mine too. June stood behind him. So would I. Gavin's smile finally left, just for a second. Then the corporate mask returned, but thinner now, like paint over rust. My team can schedule individual reviews? No, Connie said. That single word changed the room again. The manager was no longer worried about a disrupted dinner. She was worried about what had been happening under her roof. Nolan grabbed my arm lightly. "Dad, please, come outside with me." I looked at his hand. He let go. "Did Kara know?" I asked. He flinched. That answered before he did. "She told me to make sure you understood the urgency." "Kara said that?" He looked exhausted. "She said if you signed tonight, the referral could help us catch up." There it was. Not all of it. Enough. Iris said softly from the phone, "Edwin, breathe before you answer." I did, once, twice. Then I said, "You did not ask me for help. You delivered me." Nolan's face twisted. "I was drowning." "Then you should have said you were drowning. You would have asked for a budget." "I might have." "You would have said no." "Maybe." He laughed once, broken and bitter. "Exactly." I stepped closer to him. "Nolan, a desperate son still knows when he is selling his father." The words hit him. I saw it. And because I am still his father, it hurt me too. Gavin's phone buzzed. He looked at it and stepped aside, but not far enough. I heard a woman's voice through the speaker, clipped and professional. "Sabrina here. What is happening with the Robertson file?" The Robertson file. Not Edwin. Not Mr. Robertson. File. Gavin lowered his voice. "We have a concern regarding disclosures." Iris whispered through my phone, "Regional." A moment later, Gavin turned back. "Mr. Robertson, our regional coordinator, Sabrina Voss, is willing to void tonight's retainer as a courtesy." I looked at him. I never signed it. "As a courtesy," he repeated. "We can mark your file inactive and avoid further escalation." I stared at the tablet. My home value, my trust status, my son's role. Father resistant but persuadable. Why would you void something I never signed unless there is something you do not want reviewed? Gavin said nothing. Connie did. "I think this event is over." From the private room, folders were closing now, not politely, firmly. Maggie stood near the service station, eyes wet, watching a room do what her mother's room had not done. "Turn the page before the check cleared." I picked up my unsigned checkbook and the contract. For a long moment, I looked at Nolan. I wanted him to become a boy again, just for 1 second. I wanted him to say, "I'm scared, Dad," not because it would fix anything, because it would have been honest. Instead, he stood there with shame in his eyes and calculation still clinging to his silence. I thought my son had put his name behind my check. Then I saw he had put my whole life into a sales profile before I ever sat down for dinner. Connie Dale did not shout. Good managers rarely do. She stepped into the private room, folded her hands in front of her, and looked at Gavin Sloan the way a woman looks at a spill that has reached the carpet. "Mr. Sloan," she said, "this presentation is over." Gavin's smile returned, but it had lost its shine. "Connie, I think that would be premature." Otto Crane lifted his contract. "I think premature was asking for checks before explaining the back page." A few people murmured, not loudly, but enough. One by one, folders closed around the room. The sound reminded me of doors shutting in a hallway. Gavin tried to regain control. "Ladies and gentlemen, standard disclosures can sound alarming when taken out of context." I stepped forward with my contract in one hand and my checkbook in the other. "Then let's put them back in context." Nolan stood near the wall now. He looked smaller than he had at dinner. Not innocent, just exposed. I placed the contract on the nearest table and turned it over to the back page. Then I laid my unsigned check across it. The check was blank. No amount, no signature, no permission. For some reason, that blank piece of paper felt louder than anything I had said all night. "This," I said, tapping the check, "is what you wanted." Then I tapped the back page. "And this is why." Gavin held up both hands. "Mr. Robertson, nobody forced you to sign." "No," I said. "You arranged a room where politeness did the forcing." Iris McKenna's voice came through my phone, still on speaker now because I wanted the room to hear someone who understood the language. "Read the conflict line," she said. I did. Referral partner, Nolan Robertson. Then the next line. Referral compensation event. Initial planning retainer processed. June Pritchard whispered, "So, when the check goes through..." Otto finished it. "Someone gets paid." Nolan's jaw tightened. "It wasn't like that." I turned to him. "Then tell the room what it was like." He looked at the floor. That was becoming his favorite place to keep the truth. Gavin stepped between us slightly. "Referral compensation is common in many industries." I nodded. "So is mold. That does not mean I ignore it when I find it behind a wall." A nervous laugh moved through the room. Small, useful. Fear loses a little power when people remember they can still breathe. Iris continued. "Now the data access clause. I read it too. Trust summary. Property documents, insurance policies, beneficiary information, retirement income overview, affiliate services, binding arbitration, 72-hour cancellation window after retainer processing." The room grew colder with every line. Maggie stood near the service station, both hands clasped around a coffee pot she had long since stopped using. Her face was pale, but she stayed. Nolan saw her and muttered, "This all started because of her." I turned so fast my chair scraped the floor. "No," I said. "This started because of you." He flinched. Not enough, so I kept going. "She is the person who warned me. You are the person who put your name where my signature was supposed to feed your commission." Maggie's eyes filled. Connie looked at her, then at Gavin. "Silver Key will not host another private dinner here." Gavin's mask cracked. "Connie, that is an overreaction." "No," she said. "It is restaurant policy becoming smarter." Otto muttered, "About time." Sabrina Voss's voice came from Gavin's phone, sharper now. "Mr. Robertson, Silver Key is willing to mark your file inactive and void tonight's materials as a courtesy." I looked at Gavin's phone. "I never signed." "That is understood," she said. "Then you are not voiding a contract. You are trying to bury a paper trail." Silence. That was the first honest answer Silver Key gave me. None. I picked up the check and held it where Nolan could see. "You didn't ask me to sign because you trusted me. You asked me to sign because the back page paid you when I stopped reading." His face twisted. "Dad, you're humiliating me." "No," I said. "I am refusing to finance the lie you brought me into." His eyes were wet now. I wish that made me feel better. It did not. A father does not enjoy watching his son break in public, even when the son built the stage himself. Nolan whispered, "I was drowning." I nodded once. "I believe you." That surprised him. Then I finished. "But a desperate son still knows when he is selling his father." The words landed hard. They landed on me too, because I remembered the hallway, his accusation, his fear, the old business failure, the way I had sometimes been more inspector than father. But none of that changed the paper. None of that changed my name in a file. None of that changed the line that called me resistant, but persuadable. I turned to Connie. "Please protect Maggie." Connie nodded. "She has her job." Maggie looked down, crying quietly now. I looked at her. "You gave me back my own judgment tonight." She shook her head. "I just told you to turn the page." "Sometimes that is enough." Iris spoke again. "Edwin, take pictures of everything, then leave with copies. Tomorrow, we prepare the complaint package." Gavin started to object. Connie raised one hand. "Mr. Sloan, don't." He stopped. That may have been the most satisfying thing in the room. I gathered the contract, the unsigned check, Maggie's napkin, and the photos I had taken. Otto asked Iris for her number. June asked Maggie for a glass of water, and then apologized for asking like Maggie was invisible. That apology mattered. Small respect can repair parts of a room that law never reaches. Nolan followed me toward the exit. "Dad?" I stopped, but I did not turn. He said, "What happens now?" I looked back at him. "Now I call my attorney." His face went pale. "You're cutting me out?" "From my estate decisions, yes. From my financial papers, yes. From executor authority, trustee authority, family contact authority, yes." he swallowed. And as your son? That question hurt, more than I wanted it to. As my son, I said quietly, you will have to meet me without a document in your hand. Outside, the music was still playing in the square. People were still laughing. Golf carts still rolled under the Florida lights. The world had not stopped. Mine had shifted. That night, my check stayed unsigned. But something else was signed in my heart. The decision that my son would never again stand between me and my own life's work. The next morning, I called my attorney before breakfast. Not because I was angry. Anger would have called at midnight. I waited until morning because some decisions deserve daylight. By the end of that week, Nolan's name was removed from every place where trust had once been assumed. Executor, successor trustee, financial power of attorney, family contact authorization, access to estate documents, access to property files, access to insurance records, all of it changed, not as punishment, as protection. There is a difference. Silver Key's paperwork never moved forward. Iris McKenna helped prepare a complaint package with copies of the back page, the intake profile, Maggie's note, and the photos I had taken outside the restaurant. Connie Dale canceled every future private dinner booking tied to that company. Maggie kept her job. More than that, people started asking for her section by name. That made me smile. A woman who had been dismissed as just a waitress had saved more than one person from signing away judgment under soft lighting. Nolan called me 2 weeks later. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice sounded tired, not clean, not fully sorry. Tired. I was drowning, Dad, he said. I looked at the unsigned check sitting on my desk. I believe you. He was quiet. Then I said, but you should have asked for a hand. You tried to sell mine to a consultant. He breathed out like the words had hit him in the ribs. I didn't think of it that way. That was the problem. There are moments when a father wants to fix everything with one sentence. This was not one of those moments. I told him the truth. You are still my son, Nolan, but you will never again be my financial decision. He did not argue. Maybe that was shame. Maybe it was relief. Maybe it was the first honest silence he had given me in years. I do not know. I still keep the unsigned check in my desk. Not as a trophy. Not because I enjoy remembering betrayal. I keep it beside a copy of the back page because old men need reminders too. We need to remember that love is not a signature line. Family is not a shortcut around consent. And a child's struggle does not give him the right to turn his parent into an opportunity. A few weeks later, Iris, Maggie, June Pritchard, Otto Crane, and I held a small talk at the community room. We called it Read the Back Page. No fancy banner, no sales pitch. Just folding chairs, coffee, and people old enough to know that pride can be expensive. We talked about dinner seminars, retainers, cancellation windows, family contact lines, referral commissions. And the simple rule I wish I had followed before Maggie had to save me: never sign a check because someone says the word protection beautifully. My son tried to protect his future with my signature. I protected mine by refusing to give it to him. That is the bitter part. The sweet part is this. I turned the page before the check cleared. Thank you for watching and sharing this time with me today. Please tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there right now. If this story moved you even a little, please consider subscribing to Final Act Revenge. Another story is waiting for you on your screen right now. YouTube believes you may enjoy it.